Hello, everyone. This is Jim Waters with the Bluegrass Institute for Public Policy Solutions. Thanks for joining us for this series of videos about Amendment 2 and school choice, what it could do for Kentucky. You know, if Amendment 2 passes, Kentucky's lawmakers will be able to consider other options for families and for their kids. These include charter schools and scholarship programs like education savings accounts, which provide funding for parents to pay for the best educational fit for their children, including offering payment for such things as tutoring and private school tuition. Many other states have adopted these programs. They're not new or unknown. Every state that surrounds Kentucky has a type of school choice program. But the question is, if you're in a rural area, would these programs allow you and your neighbors more choices for your children? And to discuss this is Dr. John Garen, a Bluegrass Institute scholar, who's also a former economics professor at the University of Kentucky, to discuss some items here, Dr. Garen, that researchers have found on this subject.
Yes, thank you, Jim. There has been some research done, a good bit of research done on what happens in rural areas in states that have adopted charter schools and school choice programs. And I'm going to review a couple little tidbits for you, but of course, we really want to know what's going to happen in Kentucky. But let me just give you these real quickly here. And so, for example, there's a study by the Brookings Institution in 2017 that found that it turns out private schools are more common in rural areas than people think. According to this, 69% of rural families live within 10 miles of a private school. Moreover, there was a study here done by the Heritage Foundation on what to happen to private schools in rural areas after Florida adopted some significant school choice programs. So the quote is, for example, since Florida enacted its tax credit scholarship policy 20 years ago, the number of private schools in Florida's 30 rural counties has grown from 69 to 120. Meanwhile, private school enrollment in those counties has more than doubled. So there is some evidence that private schools will begin to flourish when we have the kind of funding behind it. But of course, again, people in Kentucky want to know about Kentucky. And Jim, you've got some interesting anecdotes that you've run across in your travels through the state in this regard.
That's right, Dr. Garen, and I've been really amazed at the enthusiasm and support for educational options in rural areas. And we know that there are parents and families in these areas that would take advantage of these options. I was recently out in Jackson County, which is a rural county in Kentucky, and there are two non-public schools there that are operating and doing well and providing a great education for their children. And there are parents out there who would love to have the opportunity to do that, but they would need the funding help to do it. It's a low-income area of our state. So I think the funding mechanism becomes even more important for Kentucky, maybe even some other states. We've talked to folks in Eastern Kentucky who have started their own micro schools or learning pods where families have come together and hired teachers to educate their children. And the focus there is on the students and not just some particular system, but it's on actually making sure that students get educated. And I'm finding that parents in rural areas care as much about that as parents in any other area of our state. So remember this, Amendment 2 will allow our lawmakers to move forward with providing options for families in rural areas as well as the urban areas of our state. So thank you, Dr. Garen, for your information, and thank you all for joining us here as we continue with this series of informational videos about Amendment 2 and school choice in Kentucky.